Welcome back, everybody. This is video number 5, miracle number 5. This is a really interesting story about how God, again, pushed me to do something a little bit outside of my comfort zone that really changed my life in a profound way and others' lives around me, because God seems to always be wanting to teach us how to love our neighbor as ourselves. Hopefully you've seen the previous videos that I've posted on this channel, videos 1 through 4. God has worked miracles in my life. These are serious miracles, like amazing things that have happened. And so I've documented these and told these stories through these series of videos just to let you know how Jesus Christ is working miracles in my life, but how he can work miracles in yours as well. If you choose to let God take the wheel and guide you in your life journey, he will lead you to him. That's really the message of this entire channel. You have to choose God. God gave us the choice. We can choose Jesus or we can refuse Jesus. And my life really changed the day I decided to choose him and offer my life up to him, because I had been doing it on my own and I had been doing it wrong, and it really got me into a lot of trouble spiritually and otherwise. So I'm living a life of sin and I didn't know how to get out of it. And those videos kind of tell that story. And once I turned my life over to Jesus Christ, all the amazing things that he's done for me and some of the miracles that he's performed for me, you got to check out video number 3. That one was crazy. But this is miracle number 5, and this one was another instance of God really hitting me over the head with a hammer, and it was no mistake of what he was asking me to do. So let me just get right into the story. Some of these names have been changed just to protect the identities of those involved. Since becoming Catholic, one of the things I like to do is, as I drive into work in the morning, I have about an hour drive. It's the only time I'm by myself. So I usually take that alone time and I pray, and I oftentimes daily will pray the rosary. For those of you who are not Catholic, the rosary is a prayer. It's a repeated prayer that you say over and over again. And it's a prayer to Mary, who is Jesus's mom. And we basically are praying for her to intercede. Now, a lot of people don't understand why we pray to Mary, and they say, hey, isn't praying to anybody but God sacrilegious? And you have to understand, we're not worshiping Mary. What we're doing is we're asking Mary to intercede for us. It's no different than when you ask a friend to pray for you. Say, hey, I'm going through a hard time. Would you mind praying for me? And they say, sure, no problem. And they put their hands together and they say, hey, God, help out my friend. They're having a hard time. That's what we do with Mary. We pray to Mary to intercede for us, because she's got a more direct line to God and Jesus Christ, who is her son, than we do. So if we can pray to Jesus and God, and he hears us and he'll answer our prayers, but if a lot of people are praying to Jesus, if a lot of people are going to God and saying, hey, help this person out, it helps. It doesn't hurt. When the saints and your deceased loved ones and Mary, the mother of Jesus herself, is saying, hey, Jesus, I need you to go and take care of this person. They're having a hard time. Jesus will not disobey his mother. And that's in the Bible. The wedding of Cana, she's like, hey, they ran out of wine. Go make some wine. He's like, I haven't started my ministry yet. She's like, now. He's like, all right. And he turned water into wine. I love that story. He will do what his mother asks. And so if you pray to Mary, it's just another person in heaven who's pulling for you, who's there to intercede for you at the throne of God, because Mary will not turn away anybody who comes to her for help. And that's kind of how my whole story started. My whole conversion story, the miracles of my life started with a prayer to Mary in an empty courtyard at a church. So I try to make an effort to say the rosary, which is a prayer to Mary, on my way into work. So I was saying the rosary, driving into work, and I got a text message from my wife on my cell phone. It basically was a forwarded text from one of my wife's friends. And it says, hey, pray please for my son. He's having a really hard time. We could use your prayers. I'm going to call him Peter. She's basically just said, pray for my son, Peter, and he's having a really hard time. I remember responding to my wife in a text. I'm like, well, that couldn't have been any more vague. Like, pray for what? Like, what's going on? What does he need help with? See, my ignorance. That's not what she was asking for. She wasn't asking for people to try to come and solve his problems. She was asking for prayers, because she knew this is something only God can take care of. We don't have the capacity to handle what was going on. She was asking for prayers. Stupid me was like, I guess I'll pray, and I don't even know what I'm praying for, because I was in the middle of the rosary when I got that text. As soon as I got the text, I responded. I said, God, can you please be there for Peter? He apparently is having something going on, and I don't know what it is, and I don't know what they're asking for, but I guess he needs you, so please be there for Peter. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And then I picked right back up with the rosary where I left off. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. And I just kept going on. All of a sudden, right after I had prayed for Peter and then was praying to Mary, all of a sudden, like a cinder block being dropped on my head, God said, go to him. Go to him. Those were the 3 words. Go to him. And there was no question. There was no discrepancy. Again, when it happens to me, it's like I don't hear it with my ears, but I feel it in my being. It's like in my soul. And he says it very clear. And by this point, understand, this is miracle number 5 when God has talked to me. I recognize it now. I know when it's God talking versus when it's my own brain. This was God saying, go to him. And so now I'm like, oh. And you have to understand that this was such a profound message, and it was so impactful and so stark and so earth-shattering that I actually had to pull over into the dirt and regain composure. Because by this point, when you understand when it's God talking to you versus when it's your own thoughts, there's a distinct difference. God speaks in very short sentences, like, go to him, hug him, be there for her, because I love you. Like, very short phrases. And I don't know why that is, but I read somewhere else recently that other people who've experienced God's assignments, like I have, say the same thing. It's always these short, clear, plain sentences that are so profound and they shake you up emotionally because it's God talking to you specifically out of everybody in the world about something specific that he wants you to do or that's happening in your life. It's so profound, and it just takes a minute or 2 to regain composure when this happens. This has only happened to me 5 times in my life, and this is the 5th time this happened, and this was a couple of years ago, so it's been a while since I've gotten an assignment. Maybe I'll get more, maybe I won't. It's all on God's time, but he said, go to him. 3 words, go to him. And I knew it was God right then and there because I had no interest in going to him wherever he was. I didn't even know where he was. So I got to work and I texted my wife. I might have called her, I can't remember. And I said, hey, I need you to find out where Peter is. Like, where is he? Because God just told me, again, to go to him. She goes, are you serious? I'm like, yes, God told me to go to him. She goes, I don't even know where he is. I'm like, I know, we got to find out. So I said, text your friend, find out where he is, and I'll go to him. The day went on. I didn't get off work until, I think it was like 9:30 at night. I was so tired, worked a 13-hour day, was ready to go home. I'm an hour from home, so by the time I'm on the road, it's almost 10 o'clock. My wife texted me and she goes, okay, he is locked up in a mental health facility. It's one of those 24-hour places that they hold you to stabilize you, and then once you've become stabilized, then they send you to another facility. But it's for those who are experiencing mental illness, usually kind of some kind of a meltdown or some kind of a manic episode, but those who are maybe a danger to themselves or others. But he's in one of these temporary, short-term, 24-hour hold facilities. And she gave me the address, and she's like, do what you need to do. And so I'm like, okay, it's almost 10 o'clock at night. I'm driving home, and I got to a stoplight. And if I turned left, I was going to be going home. And I wanted to go home. I was tired. I just wanted to eat dinner and go in my bed. I worked a 13-hour day. Or I could go straight and drive straight to a neighboring town and then go to this facility that he supposedly was staying at while he stabilized. So I drive there at 10 o'clock at night. I decided not to turn left and go home. I drove straight. Basically, my justification was, as tired as I am and as much as I want to go home, you don't say no to God, and God very clearly said go to him. So I drove 20 minutes out of my way to this temporary hold facility. Went up to the door. Of course, it was locked. It was 10 o'clock at night. All the lights were out, but there was an intercom. There was a little buzzer. So I buzzed, and they said, how can we help you? And I said, hi, I'm here to see, and I said his name. I said, I just need to talk to him real quick. Didn't know what I was going to say. And they explained to me through the intercom that this was a temporary hold facility, that there's no visitors ever at this place. They hold for 24 hours, and once stabilized, then they release them to a longer-term care facility. And I said, okay, can you give him a message for me? And they said, well, we cannot confirm or deny whether this person is at this facility for privacy reasons. And I said, okay. I said, well, if he's here, can you tell him that I came to visit him? And I gave him my name. Can you tell him that I came to see him? And they said, yes, we can. I went back to my car and I drove home. I said, I don't understand what difference that made. Like, I feel very unfulfilled. Like, I was told to go to him and I couldn't even see him. So I feel like it was worthless. Like, there was no point to any of that. So I went home. I just felt uneasy for days. I just felt restless. I was anxiety. I just felt like I didn't do what God told me to do. Like, I didn't complete my assignment. And I was really bothered by it. So I talked to my wife and had her reach out to her friend, because her friend is the mother of this young man who was temporarily incarcerated due to mental issues. And I said, you got to find out where he's at now. I need to go see him. I said, whatever it is that I'm supposed to do, I didn't fulfill my obligation. She found out where he was. She found out where he was staying. And it was a ways away. It was like another hour away. So I drove to a long-term mental hospital. And it's just like it is in the movies. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever gone to a mental hospital to visit anybody, but you got to like leave your shoelaces at the front or change your shoes. You can't wear any jewelry in there, and you leave your keys and you have to put it in a locker, and then you go through these like this airlock, these double doors that lock automatically, and then another set of double doors. They give you a PIN number so you can get out. You go in and the patients are oftentimes just like kind of like meandering about in the room, and some of them are just talking about you don't know what, or they're talking to people that don't exist. I mean, I was very uncomfortable, very outside of my element. Definitely not a place I wanted to go and visit. So I went in, and the son of my wife's friend, we're calling him Peter, he was there. I sat down, and his girlfriend was there visiting at the time. They have since been married. So I sat down with him, and for about 2.5 hours, he talked to me. And I was absolutely blown away, because it turned out that he has a condition called bipolar disorder. And I never really truly understood what bipolar was. I always knew that bipolar meant you had mood swings, or at least that's what I thought it was. I did not understand that there's different types of bipolar disorder. And I didn't also understand that with one of those types of bipolar disorder, people can literally hallucinate, and they can see things and hear things that aren't there. Almost kind of like what I thought to be like schizophrenia. This type of bipolar disorder, they get very manic and they feel invincible. And oftentimes in those moments where their adrenaline is going, they can injure themselves. A lot of times, for whatever reason, people with bipolar disorder, when they're having a manic episode, they rip off all their clothes and they go running in the streets because they feel like they can fly, or they feel like they can move mountains or whatever. They oftentimes get arrested. And I didn't know any of this. I didn't know. I just thought bipolar just was a mood disorder. There's actually like hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, visual hallucinations. And I spent about 2.5 hours with this young man. He's younger than me. He's an absolute brilliant mind. He's so smart. He's so charismatic. I feel like I was schooled for the 2.5 hours that I was there. I didn't know why I was supposed to be there. God said go to him, and I did. But just being there for the 2.5 hours, I left that facility with a whole new understanding of that mental condition. Just getting basically just a small little snapshot into their mind in that moment. And when they're having that type of an episode, he was in the middle of a manic episode, so he talked very fast, and he was always moving around, and it was really hard to get him to sit and focus and talk. And he was telling me about conversations with Greek gods that he's had, and it was really like intense. I was exhausted after sitting there for 2.5 hours. Like, I left, like I felt like I ran a marathon just having that experience. But I walked away with newfound knowledge that I had never had before about that mental disorder. And it really blew my mind, because I didn't know anything about it prior to that. I had no experience with mental illness. No one in my family or friends had ever had it. I just didn't know what bipolar disorder was, or how it worked, or what happens to you, or I didn't even know how to talk to somebody until I had that crash course in bipolar manic episodes with this family friend. And I left, and I still felt unfulfilled. I felt like I don't know why God told me to go see him. I didn't understand what my instructions were, other than to go to him. So I left. I got out of the mental facility and went home, and remember talking to my wife saying, I don't know why I was sent there. Like, I feel like I didn't give anything to him. I feel like he schooled me in what it's like to work with somebody who has a manic episode, but I don't feel like I offered him anything. Well, it's funny that I had that thought. I'm a college professor, and one of the things that I teach is I teach music performance, and we were putting on a public concert. A few days later, one of my students had been missing for several days. He hadn't come to class, he hadn't gone to any of his other classes, and he had a pivotal role in that concert performance. He was the drummer for one of the bands that was performing that night. And now keep in mind that this is like an exam. This concert is what these students work up to for 16 weeks of the semester. Their final exam is basically the concert performance itself. It's an assessment. It's what they're graded on. This student had been missing. He had not come to class, had not come to rehearsals, had not come to dress rehearsals. And one of the requirements of performing in the concert is you have to attend the dress rehearsals, which he never attended. So as far as I was concerned, we wrote him off, and we had another drummer who was going to be filling in for him. A few hours before the concert starts, I was meeting with the dean, and I happened to see him outside the window of her office, and he was trying to get my attention. He was waving his arms and trying to get my attention. Now keep in mind, this student that missed this class, this is not the same person who I visited in the mental hospital. This is a completely different human being, okay? A human being by which I was not aware at this time had any mental issues at all. Now, this happened several days after I went to the mental facility and met with the family friend who we're calling Peter, and I learned about bipolar disorder from that experience, at least as much as you can learn in 2.5 hours. But when I saw this student waving outside of the dean's office, I instantly knew something was wrong. I can tell he was different. I can tell there was something up. So I finished my meeting with the dean, I walked outside, and he started talking to me. I instantly understood something that I hadn't seen before and wouldn't have known before. The way he was talking, the way he was moving, the way he was communicating, it literally was just like our family friend Peter, who was in that mental hospital during his manic episode. I recognized this conversation, this situation, as being with an individual who was in the middle of a manic bipolar episode. I would not have known that had I not had gone to the mental hospital and spoken with someone who was in a manic episode for 2.5 hours. I wouldn't have known the warning signs. I wouldn't have known what to look for. In fact, with this individual, the student of mine, my first reaction would have just been simply to call the campus police and have him arrested because he was erratic. And that's what I would have done. Old Dan would have done that. But new Dan, who listened to God's assignment to go to him to visit our family friend Peter in the hospital, got a 2.5 hour lesson on bipolar disorder to the point where I was able to recognize another person who was in the middle of a manic episode. And not only was I able to recognize it, I was able to calm him down, communicate clearly with him, rein him in, and actually get him to a place where the two of us could have a productive conversation. How did I do that? Well, after you talk to somebody who's in a manic episode for 2.5 hours, you learn a little bit about how and when and what to say and how to redirect and how to kind of captivate their attention and redirect and then give them a second to kind of process and run off with that and then reel them back in. And I learned that. I was taught that by Peter, my wife's friend's son. And had I not answered God's call to go to him, I would never have had that experience of learning that. What I was able to do with this young student was I was able to help him to collect his thoughts. I was able to speak to him in a manner that kind of calmed him down a little bit. I was able to bring him into the theater to do his dress rehearsal, which he had missed because he was in the middle of a manic episode prior. He went through his dress rehearsal. That means he's able to perform in the show. I was able to go over everything with him. Keep in mind, he is spun up. He is in a manic episode. I was able to calm him down and get him to a place where he was actually able to perform in the show that night instead of getting arrested. That was the alternative. He was either going to get arrested because he was erratic, or I was going to redirect him and help him to do something positive and constructive with his evening instead of like running out in traffic with no clothes on. And I don't say that jokingly either. We were able to put him in front of a drum set and allow him to work out his manic episode on a drum kit in a concert. By the way, he was great. He put on a heck of a show. And afterwards, his grandmother came up to me and she said, "Thank you for working with him." And he hugged me and he said, "Hey, thank you for everything." And then he left. And I realized that God did not send me to visit Peter in that mental hospital because I was supposed to be helping Peter. He sent me into the mental hospital because Peter was helping me. Peter, who had bipolar disorder, taught me about bipolar disorder, because a few days later, when I had to deal with somebody who had bipolar disorder in the middle of a manic episode, I knew what to do. I knew what to do with that situation. I had enough experience from a 2.5-hour meeting with another individual to understand, to recognize the situation, to recognize those symptoms, and to interject in a positive way to help him through that evening so that he wouldn't end up getting arrested, but rather put it towards something positive. That whole go to him instruction, that assignment that God gave me, wasn't for the benefit of Peter. That was for my benefit. That was to teach me about that condition so that I could help somebody else that had it. That's what God had planned. I didn't know this. I didn't know this when I went to the mental institute, but I wouldn't have known what to do in that situation when my student came to me in a manic episode, other than call the cops and get him arrested, had I not had the experience visiting that friend in the mental hospital and learning what I needed to learn from him so that I could help somebody else. Another example of God's work, that we don't always have the big picture, but God does. We just have to do our part when we're called upon. Thanks for listening to this video. Like, comment, and subscribe so this video gets put in front of more people who need this message in their lives. Thanks for stopping by. More videos to come. Check them out.